Hi guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about what exactly a strategic plan or a strategic campaign is. And this is just going to be a big um, overview looking at a strategic campaign in general. In the coming weeks, we're going to dial in specifically to each component of a strategic campaign. But to start with, I want to give an overview so you have a sense of what the entire thing is and what each component is generally, so you are familiar at least with the stages of a strategic campaign as we begin the process of learning about them more in detail. So I'm going to share a presentation with you that I've made on PowerPoint. And the strategic campaign generally is just an effort that a person or an organization makes to change people's behavior or thinking. So it could be something a political campaign does to convince people to vote for them or to change the way they think about a particular issue. It could be something a company does to encourage people to sign up for their social media page, to encourage them to buy their products. So anything that encourages us to change our minds or change our behavior, that's a strategic campaign. And there are different campaigns will have different specific stages, but in general, these are the stages that you want to keep in mind. So we're going to know a good strategic campaign is going to involve the organization, politician, whoever is putting together this campaign. They're going to know their mission, their values before they start. So the more you're familiar with who you are, who your organization is, the better you can really define that, the better the campaign's going to go. In the real world, right, every day doing this kind of work, not every client that you work with is going to be able to clearly articulate who they are and what their values are. And that might be part of your work of being in strategy and doing strategy, is helping the client define their values, define how they describe themselves. And we'll talk about that as we go through the quarter also. Um, the the really big first active step that you tend to take is research. So you're going to research the client you're working for, their competitors, the people who are you're targeting with the campaign. So that could be customers, that could be people you're trying to persuade to act or vote or do better if it's a public service campaign, if you want people to be healthier, if you want them to stop littering, whatever you're asking people to do, whoever those people are that you want to change, you want to research those people and really any stakeholders, right? So if you've taken public relations, you know, stakeholders are anyone who has a vested interest in the campaign. So that could be people who are investing money. It could be people at the organization, people who are impacted by the campaign, anybody who has a vested interest in the campaign going well. And then after we do all of those research stages, we're going to move into strategy. So our strategy is broken down traditionally into three different parts. There's goals, tactics, strategy. I'm going to break those down in a second. And then once you have developed the plan, your research, your strategy, you're going to actually execute. After you execute, an important thing to do is take some time to evaluate. If you have the luxury, you might actually have a meeting or write some notes and formally evaluate your process. A lot of times in your working world, things are so hectic. You're moving from one campaign or one sub campaign of a larger marketing plan to another. You don't have time to formally evaluate. But even if you can just sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and jot some notes about this went really well, next time I would do this, it really helps your process and it's going to help you perform better for that organization, that client, and it's going to help you do better as a strategic thinker and as somebody who works in strategy or works in marketing. If you can and it's just a good process in life in general, right? If we take some time after a big project to think, gosh, that really went well. I'd love to repeat that next time I do something similar. And oh man, that part was not the best. How can I fail forward, right? How can I learn from that and not repeat it? So when you actually write up a strategic plan, they're going to be really different depending on who you're writing it for, your style, and is your client someone who's creative and funky and they like a lot of artistic, fun things in it, or are they very formal? You're working for an insurance company or someone with a real straight-laced um, style. You might actually just take a template, or they may even have a template for strategic campaigns, and it's going to be real by the book. Or if you're working for a funky advertising firm and they're pitching a client who's really creative, you might do something real off the wall and very different, and it could be really fun to write. But generally, it's going to start with an executive summary and then have a mission statement for the client. And depending on the work you're doing, you may be developing that mission statement, or you may just take that mission statement from the client. They may have their own mission statement already. You're going to analyze the situation, which is going to be some of your research. So you'll write about what's happening for the client right now, what's happening in the world that impacts the client situation. A lot of strategic campaigns these days are going to take COVID into account, right? And then and a lot of them are also taking into account the work that our country is doing on race. So those are two big situations that are being accounted for in a lot of strategic plans these days. There are other things that could come into play, like the situation might be the Christmas holidays, or it might be people going back to school, which is very different right now, also because of COVID. So those types of things are involved in the situation analysis. Other things you might look at are if a company has a new CEO, that could be part of a situation analysis. And again, I'll talk more about this type of stuff when we do a deep dive into research. Your target market is going to be another section probably. So you'll look at, are you focusing on men or women? Are you focusing on a certain age group? If you're focusing on an area of the country, anybody who you're really dialing down into as the people you're trying to reach, that's going to be someone you want to do research on. So what have they been interested in lately? What types of issues are they concerned with? Those types of questions. And then you may actually do write-ups on personas of who is your fantasy buyer. So you might have an ideal customer or a couple of ideal customers. Some brands will actually invent 2 to 5 customers who are the person they imagine, or the people they imagine are going to be buying their products. So you could do something like that. And then in terms of your actual plan, you're going to come up with goals and strategies and tactics. And let's look at that a little bit more in detail. So a good goal is something that is measurable and has a length of time associated with it when we talk about a strategic plan. So you want to say you're looking to increase traffic to an organization's website. A good goal would be something like you want to increase traffic or visits to the website by 30% by January 2021. So you've got a specific metric that you're aiming for and a date by when you want to see that accomplished. Another goal might be that you want to increase sales by 25% by June 2020. So you're not just trying to increase sales or increase visitors to the website. You have actual numbers that you're aiming for and a date by which you want to see it happen. Sorry, those 2 slides were reversed there. So strategies are the higher level, where it's the idea of what you're trying to accomplish. So maybe or the idea of how you're going to reach those goals. So maybe you're going to get people to invest in your brand or participate with your brand through paid advertising on television and working with influencers on Instagram. And then tactics are more specific ways that you're going to dial down and make those strategies effective. So you are going to specifically, you're going to place ads on nightly news talk shows Monday through Thursday for 5 weeks in the fall. And then you're going to interview and select influencers in the fitness industry, having them post one sponsored post each week for the month of November. So you can see the difference between the strategies. You kind of get a sense, but it's pretty vague. And the tactic is, it's real specific. It's almost a mapping out of, this is what we want to do. In the real world, when you're actually I know college is the real world. I hate that rhetoric for working world versus college. But when you are professionally paid, how about we do that? Professionally paid to do a strategic plan, you will have a real specific budget. For the hypothetical strategic plans that you're doing, I would like you to put together some kind of budget, and it can be really rough. And I want you to imagine that you can have any costs or any budget that works for you. You don't have to feel beholden to limited budgets. So I don't want this budget to be a stress for you, because this is not a business class, and you don't have to worry too much about what does a company the size I am pitching actually have to spend on television ads, or what would be, what do TV ads at 8 p.m. on local network stations actually go for. I don't expect you to know that kind of stuff. If you want, when we check in with our client in the middle of the quarter, these are the kinds of things you can ask if you're interested in trying to gauge your budget accurately. But I would just like you to give a sense of what you're going to spend your money on, and understand that money is going to be a factor. So try, and I don't expect, you're not going to be graded on accurately knowing what these types of things cost. I do not expect you to know this at all. And then something else to keep in mind, that we use the word plan in these documents, but I also want you to know that we can't predict the future, and we're very much guessing at human behavior, and humans are very unpredictable. So we're going to put these together, and we're going to say things like, we are going to put this many posts on Instagram related to this topic, or we're going to change the website copy to fit this audience more. And these types of things, yes, we can look at research, and we can look at what other organizations have done, and they can be very likely to be successful. But also, there's only so much that we can control. So it's important to keep that in mind. And it's also important to note that we don't control what other people do, and we never can. And then it's also important to know that we can't control larger forces that happen in the world. We can't control who people decide to vote for president, which can have a huge impact on what happens in the world. We can't control things like a global pandemic happening. We can't control smoke being in the air like it is now, which I'm sure is having a huge impact on many businesses. So there are many huge factors that we have no control over, even though we're trying to plan for businesses. And then also, it's good to keep in mind that when you're deciding to take certain actions, there are other things you're at the same time deciding not to do. So it's good to keep in mind that, if you're deciding to invest heavily in social media, that means you're also deciding maybe not to redo the website, or not to go out and talk to the community. So think about that a little bit too when you make decisions about what you're doing. Just take a moment to reflect on, okay, so this is what we have decided to do. What does that mean that we're not doing? But sometimes that will help you just to be smarter about investing in your decisions. And sometimes that might tip you off to something that you're forgetting about. It's a smarter way to think about strategic planning. But also just really keep in mind the limitations of this work, right? Just because you do strategic planning and just because you watch other people do strategic planning and they may seem like really smart and really successful, and they talk about the future in big grandiose terms, it doesn't mean they have a crystal ball. And it doesn't mean that you suddenly have a crystal ball or I have a crystal ball because we're talking about the future in really big and very confident terms sometimes when you pitch to clients, right? That we're all doing a lot of, yes, very well researched and coming from experience. We're still doing a lot of talking about the future, and none of us know the future. So it's I think always smart to keep that in mind, because this is a field of a lot of unknowns, and I think that's been pointed out in uh, grand fashion in the last 6 months. So um, good to keep that in mind as we move into a class where we're talking about strategic planning. And that's just a real high level overview of what a strategic plan is. We'll get into more detail about each of the different sections, and we will start with research, just because that's the first step that you will take as you work on your own strategic plans. Thank you, guys.